What's up, everybody? We are live in the Falcons podcast here. Give me just a second. I'm going to add in our friends over on Facebook and on Twitter, and then we will get underway. All right, and we are live. What's up? Welcome in. We're starting a little bit after the fact, but we're still pretty much on time. But this is the Falcons podcast with Garrett Chapman. Been a busy day. It's been a really busy day, but welcome in. If it's your first time here, my name is Garrett Chapman. I am your host. Give me a follow at GChapATL on Twitter. Stay fully up to date on everything that we have coming out over there on Falcons on SI. But also make sure to like the video. Make sure to share it with your friends. Make sure to get them in here on this Falcons discussion because tonight we got another big show set up for you. Arthur Blank, he addressed the media earlier today. Did we learn anything? I got a couple of nuggets that I took away, but I will also take your questions on that matter. So make sure to drop those into the chat, and I will get to as many of those as I can. I'll also give you the latest on the coaching cycle that is spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning. We have another opening today. Another opening popped up. That's 25% of the NFL now that's going to be searching for their future head coach, including your Atlanta Falcons. And like I mentioned before, as always, I will take your comments. I will take your questions. So make sure to drop those into the comment section, and I will get to those as much as I can throughout the show. And then the other big nugget that I want to drop in here, super chats. Those are the best way to support me, to support this channel. Scott said he might kick me out otherwise. So please, I really appreciate you. Make sure to drop it in here as you can. Keith Robbins, I see you're jumping in. He says, did I miss live? No, you're live right now. We just got going. Generally, we get started right at 6 o'clock, but we are a little behind just because I'm churning out a lot of work today, and it's been a lot. So I think you've got a lot to look forward to over there on Falcons on SI, including some other stuff. But John Harold Jr. says, yo, what's up, my man? So I'm gonna get you guys. I'll flash you guys up here. I'll get you guys up here on the screen. Colin Cobble says, I like your cut, G. Appreciate you, man. Yeah, I had to get the new cut, man. I had to go get the new digs, and I got to get this all figured out, man. I appreciate you. We're getting in here. Keith Robbins says, okay, I'll have to talk with Scott. You're not going anywhere. All right. Well, Keith Robbins, I appreciate you. I'm not going anywhere. I appreciate that. Let's jump in here. Let's first start off with the thing from Arthur Blank. The first thing that honestly I think should be on everybody's mind is the fact that Michael Penix is going to be the franchise quarterback. That's the guy that Arthur Blank, he reaffirmed that Penix is going to be the guy. Yes, he's only started, I believe 11 games now, 12 games in his NFL career, and he has not been necessarily all that fantastic at times. He's shown some of the potential, and I think Arthur Blank reaffirmed that he's shown enough to have the backing of the ownership group and saying that that's going to be the guy. And he confirmed that the surgery went well. He confirmed that the surgery is that he's on target and he's tracking to potentially be ready by this summer. That's just what it looks like right now. But he's in the Falcons facility. This is also pretty much consistent with what Raheem Morris said around Christmas, the last time we spoke with him about Michael Penix. But Penix is going to be the guy. Kirk, it seems like the writing is definitely on the wall. He said, we'll see about Kirk Cousins, which, I mean, considering he didn't want to throw anybody under the bus in this press conference today, I think he was being very professional when it came to not throwing people under the bus. I think that at the end of the day, it's like he didn't want to do that. So this is the closest thing he came. Sorry, I got distracted there with one of the comments. But no, he didn't want to throw anybody under the bus. He kind of came closest to throwing Kirk Cousins under the bus. Let's just be pretty clear about that he doesn't think that he's going to be back. He all but said it. I don't think he's going to be back either. So, of course, we talked about the reworked contract on the podcast on Tuesday. So make sure to go check that one out. You can learn a little bit more about that. But of course, the Falcons have about $32-ish million more that they're going to be able to spend coming up in this free agency cycle. And that's going to be pretty useful for them as they get into a new regime. And it gets them under the cap, which is also going to be really nice. But I just do not expect. Of course, that decision is going to be coming March 12th or before. So it's, as long as it hits before March 13th, the Falcons have their agreement in place and they're going to be able to move on. But Penix is the guy. Penix is the guy. And until proven otherwise, unless they get a new coach in here, and I think that these things can change a little bit, but I do like the idea that they're going to come back and give Penix one more opportunity. I would see potentially year 3 being a pretty important year for Penix. He's got to at least show that he's capable of, first off, staying healthy and playing throughout the course of the regular season, finishing it out strong. And then secondly, you got to play well. You got to play really well, because then you get into that 4th year. And then I still think that ultimately that 4th year, you're going to be potentially playing for your job, for your future in the organization. I think that would make a lot of sense there. So it's not a do or die necessarily for Michael Penix, but if you have a new coaching regime, they're not going to be loyal to you. So I think that he's going to be here at least the 4 years, right? First and foremost, they're going to be here through 4 years, but the new coach is not going to be loyal to Michael Penix in the same way that Raheem Morris was, right? So that's just, it's good. It's a good step one that ownership has backed him and coming in behind him. Trenton comes in here with a super chat saying G Money nickname picking up steam. I've heard G Money. I've got G Money. Look, Garrett is one name. I've heard my older brother called me Geet when I was a little kid. I mean like an infant. I've heard G Man. That's what my mom calls me. I've had all kinds of nicknames. G Money is what Steak Shapiro calls me over at 92.9 The Game. That's his nickname for me. I've heard a lot of different ones. I see some people coming in here. Cotter Alm says, just got on. Nice cut, G Money. Appreciate you. It is picking up steam. I guess a lot of people are kind of rolling with it. I'll take it. I like G Money. Trenton Flew says, good question today, Garrett. Getting some clarity on the quarterback situation. Appreciate you. It was an important question, and I thought that it needed to be asked. I was at the press conference today. I did get my one question in. I was going to be asking full transparency, I guess you could say. I was going to be asking about why having the ZR Group and Sportsology at the center of this coaching search. I don't think that makes a lot of sense, especially when clarity was the number one thing that we learned from this third party that comes in and checks out your group. And now that you're going to have 2 groups that are going to be leading your search, it didn't make sense to me. But the question was asked right before, so I was like, screw it, let's dive into this quarterback situation. And it ended up being it led us down the road to eventually getting an answer here on Michael Penix. But appreciate you, Trenton. John Roberts says Penix needs more targets and needs to be more mobile. Well, I mean, yeah, he does need more targets. His mobility is something that he's effectively wrapped in. He's not a super mobile quarterback, but when he gets out into open space, that's where he could show off some of his speed. He's got some speed. It's just that lateral movement is not necessarily his strength. Maybe that's something to do with the three ACL injuries. But I mean, he's shown that he's capable of moving in the pocket. It's just there's a difference between mobility and pocket movement, and he is not awesome in terms of pocket movement. But he's still young. He still has plenty of room to progress and kind of keep going on. I'm trying to get through to some of your comments as well. What's your thoughts on coaching? I need a haircut bad, John Harold. Yeah. We can all use a haircut, man. I think we all can every now and then. I desperately needed one. You go back to look at any of those videos of me before. My hair was all over creation is because I was all in on football talks. And then it's like, hey, man, I get to go to Arthur Blank's headquarters. I got to be ready to go. So I had to go get the haircut. We're going to get into the coaching carousel. John Harrell, we're going to get into that here as we get in throughout the show. I got another super chat here. It says G-Dog. I'll take G-Dog. Actually, I don't think I've heard G-Dog before. That one would be a first. I don't know if I've actually heard that one before. So John Roberts says, how many ACLs does Penix have? Well, he's 2, just like all of us. We all have 2 ACLs. He's just had his surgically repaired 3 times. So 2 on one knee, 1 on the other. And if I'm mistaken, I don't want to say this incorrectly. I believe he has 2 on the left and 1 on the right. And the most recent one is the one on the right. It's his plant leg. It's the same injury that he had against the San Francisco 49ers. Well, it's the same knee that he had the injury with the San Francisco 49ers that cost him the game against the Dolphins the next week. He then tore the ACL against the Carolina Panthers later on in the season. But no, I mean, I know you're asking facetiously. He does have 2, just like we all do. Evan says the new cut makes you look like Scott. Well, I'll take that as a compliment. Keith, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. A super chat. I really do appreciate that one. Super chats are the best way to get in touch. So I do appreciate that. Keep on going through. Keith says Falcons can't get it right on their own. Well, I mean, they're going to have to eventually. We hope so. And that's what this new president of football is hopefully going to be able to do. We'll talk about the president of football here when we get in throughout the show. Jeff Holton says Penix could be good, but he needs some direction in coaching. Not sure he got much under Raheem. He got plenty of coaching. Look, I want to be very careful that we're not having this sort of revisionist history on what kind of coach Raheem Morris is. I think ultimately he's a good coach. Does that make him a good head coach? That's a different question entirely, right? Making in-game decisions, knowing when to challenge plays versus when to call timeouts versus when to go for it versus little adjustments that you can make in-game. That he wasn't as good at, and it cost the Falcons games. It did, and that's why he ultimately got fired. But as far as like him, he's well respected as a coach, right? And he's also not coaching Michael Penix specifically. That's not his specific role. That comes down to Zach Robinson and TJ Yates, who was the passing game coordinator, and then moved into to be the wide receivers coach. And look, you have specific guys who were there to coach him, and he was getting coaching. I know a lot of people on Twitter were talking about how he was sitting by himself on the sidelines and nobody was coming over and talking to him. That wasn't the case. I'm at the games. I'm watching the sidelines. I see the people, the coaching staff coming over and talking to him in the middle of games. But I do tend to agree. I think he needs an offensive coordinator who's going to give him some support, make it a simpler type of offense that's conducive to a young quarterback. I mean, obviously you're not going to get a Sean McVay, but you want a guy who's going to come in and be a bright mind. Clint Kubiak is a perfect example of that. And it gets into a report that came out from Jeremy Fowler earlier today, where he said basically that they could be explosive. That's what an NFC coach said about Clint Kubiak coming to Atlanta with Michael Penix, with Bijan Robinson, with Drake London, with this offensive line. He called it explosive. And I think he's exactly right. You pair an elite, dynamic head coach with this team, then I think that you actually have something that could really take off. And that gets me into my second point, and I'm going to come back to your comments here in just a little bit. Arthur Blank reaffirmed the fact that he wants Jeff Ulbrich back in Atlanta. He wants Jeff Ulbrich back. That would be good for the Falcons. And I think it also is good for a young up-and-coming coach like a Clint Kubiak to come to Atlanta, because you get a bright young mind where all he has to do, well, he's going to focus on everything. Obviously, it's an all-encompassing. It's your job to be the head coach, but you can focus more heavily on the offense. And I think that having a guy like Jeff Ulbrich on the defensive side of the ball, where you can just lean all in and he can just take over and he's going to cover everything on that end, that makes a lot of sense. I think that makes a ton of sense. And I think that makes the Falcons a specifically tantalizing and exciting option for one of those types of coaches. Kevin Stefanski would also get into that kind of mold. You can make the argument. I mean, John Harbaugh is one that, of course, is going to draw a lot of attention. But I think if John Harbaugh comes in here, you're looking at him bringing his own staffers, which is fine. Fine. Like, John Harbaugh, you're one of the greatest coaches of this generation. You can bring in whatever you want. You can dictate some terms when it comes to that. But if it's one of these younger guys, then, or specifically one of the offensive coaches, having a Jeff Ulbrich back does make a lot of sense. I do want to keep this important caveat here. While Arthur Blank wants Jeff Ulbrich back, he cited a lot of the progression that the unit made, the sack record, stuff like that. He did not mandate it. So he says that it's not something that he has to see happen. So if Clint Kubiak, for example, just the flavor of the month, the guy that I'm talking about right now, if he wanted to bring in his own staffers, if he wanted to go get his own guys, he would be allowed to do so. It's just the recommendation would be to go get a Jeff Ulbrich and bring him back in the building. And look, selfishly, somebody who worked with Jeff Ulbrich, somebody who was up there at Flowery Branch all the time, I want to see Jeff Ulbrich back. The players, they respond to him. The staff, they responded to him. The results on the field, they showed for themselves. And I'd say that ultimately, the number one reason why the Falcons floundered this season was not as much to do with Michael Penix getting hurt or some of the injuries on the offensive side. I'd actually say it had more to do with Divine Diablo than it did anything else. The moment he went down, the Falcons lost 5 straight games. They come back, everything changes, and all of a sudden the Falcons finish the game on, what is that, 4-2 to finish the season. They end the season really, really well. So Jeff Ulbrich, I think ultimately you reinforce that position of linebacker. You reinforce, maybe go get some corners, go get some defensive tackles, shore up some of the run defense a little bit. I think that all of a sudden that makes the Atlanta Falcons a very interesting team moving forward. But they got some needs. I mean, those are just a couple of them. Wide receiver is also another big need. You need an offensive tackle at some point. That's going to be something that you have to address at some point. But I think that could be a potentially compelling hire. So appreciate my the comment here that actually that reminded me of that fact. Gabriel Rogers says his knees are fried, bro. Yeah. Well, he's rehabbing. He's talking, of course, with Michael Penix, who did tear his ACL. Should be back at some point in the summer. Maybe. They might be. And ultimately, I mean, you're looking at a situation where I think that he's going to have a short leash. If he comes back and he continues to show injury concerns, then I think the Falcons, they're going to cut bait and they're going to move on. What that actually ends up looking like, I think remains to be seen. But I do think that pairing the ability, the physical arm talent and the ability of Michael Penix with an exciting coach who can actually capture his talent a little bit more effectively than what Zach Robinson was able to do, then I think that makes for kind of a compelling topic there. To keep him. Now, it doesn't matter if you're not healthy. So if you can't stay healthy, then it's a moot point. But talent alone, and the fact that you've already invested an 8th overall pick in this guy, it's going to be enough to potentially keep him around at least this next year. We'll see what actually happens after that. But I would expect he'll be here through his 4 years guaranteed in a Falcons uniform. 5th year, again, remains to be seen. Keep on going through. Calderon says, my dream coaching tandem, Saleh, Kingsbury, McDaniel, DC, Ulbrich. Well, I think this actually gets into another big thing. And look, I'm actually just going to start going out of order because this actually gets me into one of my thoughts here for Robert Saleh, who is somebody who the Falcons have reportedly asked per Adam Schefter. They put in the request for him this morning. And this is one of those things that I think would make a ton of sense. You go get a McDaniel. I love that idea. I think McDaniel is also going to be generating some interest as a head coach. And McDaniel would also be a really tantalizing option to go up to the Washington Commanders. I think that's probably where he ends up. Ultimately, Kingsbury probably makes a little bit more sense down here in Atlanta. So I think that could actually end up working out well, just effectively doing a little swapperoo. But McDaniel is going to go up there. I think he's going to go there just because of his relationship with Dan Quinn. He was on the staff here in Atlanta in 2016. McDaniel looks up to Dan Quinn in a big way. Of course, it goes back to the off-field things that McDaniel was going through at the time. Dan Quinn was a mentor. He was a father figure for McDaniel, and I think McDaniel would be hard-pressed to find somebody else he would want to go coach for. But Saleh is somebody who I think would come in and do really well. I believe he was on my hot board. If he wasn't, then no, he was. He definitely was on my hot board because he's somebody I think very highly of. He is a defensive-minded coach, so it would be kind of more the trend of what the Falcons have done in recent years. I mean, most of the head coaches that they've actually gone and acquired have been defensive-minded head coaches, aside from Arthur Smith. I think all of them, for the last 5, have been defensive-minded. And Saleh is somebody who I think very highly of, and people across the NFL think very highly of him as well. Falcons won't be able to even speak to him until 3 days after his team is eliminated. So it might set their plans back just a little bit because they won't be able to speak to him anytime soon. But he could be the right guy. And I think he said specifically that he's not going to jump at just the first opportunity. He wants to find a place that's going to fit his needs. And I think that having a Jeff Ulbrich already here, that's somebody, a voice in the building that he looks up to, somebody he not looks up to, but somebody who he trusts, somebody who he's worked with before. So you have that relationship already here. I love that idea. And then McDaniel was somebody who was on that staff in San Francisco. So to that other point, to the commenter's point, maybe McDaniel wants to do that, and maybe you pair that, and maybe he likes the weapons here in Atlanta just a little bit more. I love the idea. I think that this would be a tremendous scenario. My only concern then is that you are then going to be in the situation maybe next summer or next spring when you jump into it, because Kingsbury is somebody who's eventually going to land some head coaching interest. McDaniel is absolutely going to be somebody who's going to be generating head coaching interest. So the worry is that you then are contingent on finding the next great offensive mind who can come in and be the guy for Michael Penix in this offense. That's one of the reasons why you want to go find an offensive coach. That's my opinion. There are a lot of differing opinions. I mean, because you look at a lot of the great coaches that have staying power, a lot of them have had staying power just because they're really good managers. They're really good motivators. They're really good at organizing. Tomlin's a perfect example of that. Harbaugh is a good example of that. Bill Belichick, shoot, man, that guy won 8 Super Bowls, 6 with the Patriots, right? He's a defensive coach. So I think there are a lot of ways to do things, and I don't think that there's one perfect one necessarily, but this one, at least for next season, and then maybe even the season after that, I think that this one makes a whole lot of sense. And I think that that would get fans very, very excited about the new regime. Super chat. As always, if I get a super chat, I will always drop you right to the front. So I appreciate it. Mr. Jeff Holton says, when do you think there will be a decision on president of football, a.k.a. Matt Ryan? Great question. So I'm going to dive right into that, Jeff. So the first interview was just completed today. It was for Brandon Tillis. He was the Panthers executive vice president. And let me go pull up a quick thing on him. I found a little blurb, and I have this up there on Falcons on SI. If you guys want to go follow that, make sure to bookmark that and keep coming back to it, because I update this as much as I can, just as based off of what I hear from the team, what I'm hearing from other sources as well. And I just sort of like come back to it and include some nuggets. So go ahead and bookmark on that one. I've got one for the head coaching search. I've got one for the president of football, and then one for the general manager. So Brandon Tillis, first season with the Carolina Panthers, spent 14 years with the Kansas City Chiefs in their front office. He worked as vice president of football operations for 3 seasons there. But in this role here, he works with general manager Dan Morgan on scouting and salary cap with analytics. He leads contract negotiations. He does football administration, non-coaching matters related to operations equipment. It's a lot of mumbo jumbo, but ultimately it's, hey, I do all the things that president of football would do. It makes sense for the role, right? And he's experienced. He's somebody who's done this sort of thing before. But it is supposedly Matt Ryan's job to lose. The job has supposedly already been offered to him. That's not publicly going to be stated just because it's against the Rooney Rule. You have to satisfy the Rooney Rule before you can officially make a hire or officially offer the job. But Matt Ryan is widely considered to be the front runner. That is going to be the first position that is filled. So one of the reasons why Arthur Blank's press conference today got cut short, it's because he had to go do these interviews, right? So they started today, and they're going to go through to tomorrow. I would expect that we have an official decision. My speculation is that we'll have some sort of decision by the end of the weekend. I would expect maybe even by Monday. Monday morning would make a lot of sense for the Falcons to make this decision. And then at some point, then they would set up a press conference and they would get right to work. And then they can get back into the thick of things and hiring that next head coach, that next general manager, because there are going to be a lot of these guys who are stonewalled because their teams are in the playoffs. They will then become available, right? And you want to get this job done as soon as possible. That's why they're doing these interviews right now. And I think that they're going to make a hire pretty quickly. And I think that it's Matt Ryan's job to lose, right? Arthur Blank talked a lot about the way that he feels about Matt Ryan, his high IQ, his high EQ, the way he commands a room, the way that he understands the game of football and the way that it's played, just stuff like that. And he gushed about it, and rightfully so. He thinks very highly of him. He's known him since 2008. That's a very long time. And Arthur Blank, I imagine, sees him like a son, so getting a guy that you know and trust into the organization who knows football, is widely respected throughout the NFL, it makes a lot of sense. But it does matter that he's not experienced. He has never done something like this before. Would that hamper him in this role? Yes, probably. Getting in and not doing a job that you've never done before, it's difficult, and there is a learning curve. But sometimes people who just know the game of football, they just know. But to answer your question, Jeff, I would expect at some point this weekend. I'm not basing that off of anything that any insider has told me necessarily, but just based off of inferences and the way that they're rapidly approaching this, and the fact that they're going to be on a ticking clock because they're competing with all these other teams. Now there are 8 teams that have now have a coaching opening, you're going to want to get in this sooner rather than later. But some of these other names to keep an eye on: Josh Williams. He is he directs pro and college scouting efforts for the San Francisco 49ers. Mike Dissner. He is the chief operations officer for the Detroit Lions. That one came from Albert Breer. That's a guy who's been integral in working alongside of Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell throughout the course of this Detroit Lions rebuild. So that's going to be a name to watch there. And then Ian Cunningham is a name that I think keeps coming up. He has been requested both for the president of football and for the general manager. And at this point, he remains the only guy who has been requested for general manager. So I expect that list is going to continue to grow. If you do see Matt Ryan not handed this role, but if he gets this role, I would expect Ian Cunningham to then become the general manager. And then from there, I think that we'll see. Kevin Stefanski would make a lot of sense there. Clint Kubiak would make a lot of sense. John Harbaugh, of course, was the stated goal of Arthur Blank was to be in the mix for John Harbaugh. But those are my four. Those are my four that I want right now as far as head coaches are concerned. Ian Cunningham, I want him to be my general manager just based off of his experience with Howie Roseman, with his experience with Ozzie Newsome in Baltimore. He's touched a lot of the great organizations, and he goes to Chicago, and all of a sudden they start winning. Causation is not necessarily correlation is not necessarily causation, but we shall see. I think that makes a very interesting point there. But that's where we stand. I mean, as far as the requested head coaches go, it is just Kevin Stefanski, it's Clint Kubiak, it's Anthony Weaver, it's Vance Joseph now from the Broncos, and it's Robert Saleh. Those are your five candidates that you have now requested an interview with. But some of these guys, you're not going to get a chance to actually talk to them. It's just kind of a formality that you want to get in line and kind of get with them. Give me just a second. I'm going to take a sip of water. Excuse me. But Jeff, thank you for the super chat. As always, if you do have a question that you really want to get answered, that is the best way to do it. And I appreciate your support. Appreciate your support of this podcast. Make sure to share it. Make sure to like it. I see we got 160 people across all platforms. Got a lot of people on Twitter. If you don't follow me there, make sure to hit that follow button. If you're over there on YouTube, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to drop in. And if you're on Facebook, share it with your friends. I see we don't have as many people over there on Facebook, so all the more reason to share. Get some folks involved. Keith says, your opinion, what's the chance of us getting Harbaugh? Pretty good. Pretty good. I think he's going to go to the Giants. I think that's the one that makes the most sense just based off of, just general chatter that I've been hearing. And maybe that's just because it's the New York team. But that's just my opinion. I think that Harbaugh would have plenty of reason to come to Atlanta. I think the Falcons are going to make him say no. They're gonna get him in this building and they're gonna talk to him. They made the mistake with Jim Harbaugh, and hopefully they don't make it again, because that's a guy who he won at a high level in Baltimore for a very long time. You go back to the time since 2008 and 18 seasons, Falcons have had 5 coaches in that time. 5 coaches. And you want to look at it this way. The Falcons have had, 17 winning seasons all time. Jim Harbaugh's had, I think, 13 just in his career since 2008. Falcons have been kicking and screaming and punishing their fans since 1966. You go get a guy like that here who just knows how to win. That matters. It matters a whole hell of a lot. And I think the Falcons would be foolish not to go get John Harbaugh. Arthur Blank all but confirmed that he has a desire for the Falcons to go after him. So I expect that that's going to be the case. And the Falcons are going to make him say no. And that is exactly what they should be doing. But still, to answer your question, Keith, I'd say okay. I'd say our odds are fine. I think Miami would make a lot of sense for him potentially. I'd say just based off of the timeline of when they fired Mike McDaniel, I would imagine that they were in touch with his agent and got kind of a good feel from that. I mean, I know the reports say that they fired McDaniel for no other reason, for internal reasons, because they made that decision on their own. I don't buy it. The timing of it doesn't make any sense to me, but we'll see. Terry says the dysfunction within the coaching staff, the loyalty to Zach Robinson, keeping the special teams coordinator for an entire season, who's direct linked to multiple losses, were all bad looks for Ra. Yes. It's a strong comment. It's one of the reasons why he got fired. Ultimately, that had a big deal, a big reason to do with it. Keith Robin says Mike McDaniel at OC. Yeah, I talked about this one just a little bit. I think it makes a ton of sense. I would love to get Mike McDaniel back here in Atlanta. Shoot, he may get a chance to go be a head coach here in Atlanta. I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. He's an exciting young coach who just was handed a disaster of a quarterback who was making a lot of money. And ultimately, that's going to put you in pretty bad shape. Oh, man. 91 Gamer Boy says, would there be a chance the Falcons would look at Mac Jones to fill before Michael Penix comes back? Yes, absolutely. Let me look at Mac Jones' contract. Let me go double check this. Because I want to remember if they have an out or if he's done at the end of this season. Okay, so they have an option for him for next year. So he's under contract. So to answer your question, Gamer Boy, no. I just flipped my answer. I would, in a perfect world, I think Mac Jones would make a ton of sense. But in this instance, you'd have to make a trade to go get Mac Jones, and I don't think the Falcons are going to be interested in making a trade. They don't really have a lot of assets in terms of draft capital. Looking in here, I'm trying to see. I don't want to tell you wrong because now the picks are effective. Oh, shoot. Where is it? I had it pulled up here a second ago. Yeah, whatever. The Falcons don't have a lot of picks. Obviously, we don't have our first round pick. And they are going to have to figure all that stuff out. And sending a trade. Yeah, so they have their second round, their third round, their fourth round, their sixth round, and seventh round. We don't have a first or a fifth, just due to trades and things of that nature. So I'm not in the market to trade picks right now. If you can get them for a seventh, great. Then absolutely go do that. If you can get them for a sixth, maybe I might consider that. But I don't think that the Falcons are going to be interested in doing that necessarily. I think that Mac Jones fits what they have in San Francisco really, really well. And for what they are paying him, I would say that there is a small chance that they end up trading him just due to the injuries that Brock Purdy's been dealing with, the massive contract that Brock has. You want to maintain an effective backup option. And I think Mac is going to be that. If he was a free agent, yes, I think that the Falcons would be foolish not to go do that. That's because that's the route that I see them taking. I do see them going and pushing for a veteran quarterback, somebody who's been around the NFL. I talked about Zach Wilson. He can be one guy who I know a lot of people are going to scoff and go crazy about that idea. Former first-round pick. He's got mobility. He's got a fantastic arm. And his biggest detriment is that he played for the New York Jets, right? I mean, he was a bit of a head case. He goes down to Miami. It's a bit concerning that they went with Quinn Ewers instead of Zach Wilson. I think that does kind of not bode well for him necessarily. But someone's going to offer him a contract to go be a backup quarterback somewhere, very similar to what Daniel Jones got in Indianapolis. Young quarterback, exciting arm talent. I think that makes a lot of sense. You can go get a guy like that for pretty cheap because you don't want to be spending a whole bunch of money. Donnie says, John Roberts, Penix needs new knees and ACLs, and unfortunately that wouldn't help him become better. We need to move off him as fast as possible. I'm even okay with keeping Kirk next season, moving off Penix, and maybe trying to find a quarterback in the second round to play behind Kirk because Penix isn't the answer. This feels a little run around with your hair on fire type of situation. You're not keeping Kirk Cousins on his current contract. Let's just be very, very clear about that. He is set to make somewhere in the range of, I think it's $67.5 million. No, I'm not paying Kirk Cousins $67.5 million. Maybe so one idea here, Donnie, and I will humor you here with this. If Clint Kubiak ends up being the coach for the Atlanta Falcons, he coached Kirk Cousins in Minnesota. Maybe he would want to come back to Atlanta if that were the situation and Clint Kubiak is the coach. Maybe he would kind of find a reworked contract and kind of figure that out because then the Falcons would cut him, still be paying him, and then maybe he would take less money. I don't know if he would do that necessarily. It would get kind of messy. It would just get kind of messy. But the Falcons are cutting Kirk Cousins. I can say that pretty confidently. I think that they are going to be cutting Kirk Cousins, but that doesn't mean that he's completely ruled out from being their quarterback next year. It doesn't make a lot of sense. I don't expect it to make a lot of sense. It's also one of the reasons why I don't think it's going to happen. But you're also not moving off of a quarterback like in Penix, who has played 2 years in the NFL that you invested an 8th overall pick in. What do you gain from moving on? You're not going to get value for him if you trade him. And if you cut him, someone's going to sign him the next day, right? And maybe he realizes that potential. Maybe he doesn't, but it's not something that the Falcons are going to do. It's not the way it happens. Kirk Cousins, I doubt is going to be here. Michael Penix, I fully expect to be here. I fully expect Michael Penix to be the starting quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons next year, barring some situation like what you see with Ole Miss, right, where Trinidad Chambliss just takes over for an injured Austin Simmons, and now he's run into the Fiesta Bowl, and he's playing in the semifinals, right? Obviously, it's college. It's not the NFL. It's not a great example, but Daniel Jones is another kind of one of those if you want to go to the NFL. I mean, guys find themselves. You get a new head coach. You figure things out. Sometimes it is a change of scenery that matters a lot, but Michael Penix isn't going anywhere. Trent Flew says, everyone says something about Penix's knee. Penix plays the game the way quarterbacks who win Super Bowls play traditionally. Hurts is the first one to get over the hump mobile-wise. We need arms, not legs. Well, yes and no. I mean, I would say that Patrick Mahomes is somebody who is relatively mobile. He also has elite pocket presence. Michael Penix doesn't really have that same kind of pocket presence. I mean, you go back through these other Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. I mean, I guess you're thinking of Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and guys like that. This day and age, more of your competitive quarterbacks in the NFL, the majority of your competitive quarterbacks are going to have some kind of mobility as part of their game. That's just a reality. But you make a decent point. I mean, like, look, quarterbacks who run first, I don't even say Jalen Hurts is run first necessarily. It's not really what he is. Even Lamar Jackson's not necessarily run first. It's just they have that ability in their game. It kind of unlocks things. Josh Allen, kind of in that same ilk as well. I mean, yeah, there are a lot of different ways that you can win. He has elite arm talent. The one that they always compare him to is Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is also former number 1 overall pick. He's taller than Michael Penix is. And look, the guy's an absolute gamer, and he plays through injuries, and he's also somebody who was hurt a lot at the beginning of his career, right? He's dealt with different injuries. He's played through a lot of pain, but he hasn't had to deal with a lot of the debilitating knee injuries necessarily, but he's had his fair share. If you go look at the early parts of Matthew Stafford's career, when he goes to the Detroit Lions, he missed several games, and a lot of people were calling him a bust before he really got going. It wasn't until like 2012, I'd say, or so, something like that, before he really took off. And then when he took off, he was up. He was out of there, right? So he was really good. But it's also the evolving nature of the NFL right now, where a lot of teams are going to the ground. So you're not seeing people throw the ball 40 yards down the field anymore. That's just not something that they do a bunch. I want to say that people have thrown the ball 40 yards down the field. It was the most in NFL history a couple of years ago. I want to say this exact, I'm trying to remember what the exact stat was. It was like 10 years ago, 40-plus yard throws down the field were a league record, right? And now it's just shot all the way down in the opposite direction. They're just not doing it anymore, right? So you need somebody who can get the ball down the field, take the efficient pass. And unfortunately, Michael Penix hasn't shown to be a very efficient quarterback. And I think that's going to be one of the things that's going to work against him in this new era of football, because it's constantly evolving. It's constantly evolving. The NFL is so different from just 5 years ago, much less 10, 15, 20 years ago. So saying that this is the only way that a quarterback can win, or this type of quarterback is the only one that's going to win, I think it's short-sighted. And I think we have to be able to look not about what's happening right now, or especially what's happened 10 years ago, but what's going to be the case in a couple of years. And that's why general managers make so much money, right? Because they have to be making those kinds of forward-thinking discussions and think about that. But your point is well received, and it's a fair one. Terry Clark says, if Harbaugh was bringing Monk in with him and we could keep Ulbrich, that would be my dream scenario. But that's a two-way street for John, and I'm sure the rumors coming out of Green Bay probably has him patient. I don't know what to make of the rumors coming out of Green Bay. That's another one of those types of positions that doesn't come open very often. And if I'm Harbaugh, Green Bay comes open, you got Jordan Love and Micah Parsons, and you got a lot of talent up there in Green Bay. I'm keeping an eye on that for sure. But, I mean, I don't know what to make of it necessarily because they are in the playoffs. And if LaFleur goes on a run, then are you really going to fire him? So Harbaugh did say that he is going to delay his decisions, that he's not going to take any interviews. He's not going to talk to anybody just in the early portions of this process. He said he wants to wait. He wants to kind of decompress a little bit. Maybe he is stalling to Terry's point here. But I do like the idea of getting him down here in Atlanta. Monken is somebody who I know Georgia fans would be very excited to get him down here. And then Jeff Ulbrich, if you can retain him, I think that would be a really good thing, right? I'd love to keep Jeff Ulbrich here in Atlanta. Dream scenario, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, and ultimately, whoever Harbaugh wants to bring down here, I think would make a lot of sense. Ulbrich would make a ton of sense because he once he lost McDonald. I was going to call him McDavid. I'm like, not McDavid. That's a hockey player. Once he lost McDonald to Seattle, you saw his defense regress a good bit. So I would say Jeff Ulbrich coming down, staying here in Atlanta, getting Harbaugh, bring Monken. I think that makes a ton of sense, and I think that'd be pretty fun. Mro2099 over there on YouTube says, the last time when Atlanta was looking for a GM, they had to wait until New Orleans was eliminated from the playoffs to make an announcement. NFL should have coaching window start after Pro Bowl, Super Bowl. I mean, this is just the conversations. I mean, I guess theoretically, if you want to talk about coaching calendars and stuff like that, I think the NFL has pretty much got it down pat. Having to wait until after New Orleans was eliminated from the Super Bowl, I don't think it had, not the Super Bowl, but just from the playoffs, I don't think it actually had that big of an impact. It's not exactly what's going on in the college ranks where people are coaching teams in the playoffs and losing their players and losing coaches and stuff like that in the midst of a playoff run. It's not exactly what's happening with that, but it is fine. I think it's fine. I don't think it's that big of a deal, truthfully. Gabriel Rodriguez says, you're saying Matt Ryan is general manager. No. Matt Ryan for president of football. That's going to be a separate entity. It's going to be the general manager and the head coach who report. Think about it as like a triangle right there, right? These two work together. Yeah. President of football at the top, head coach, general manager. That's where I see Matt Ryan going. That's the role that he has been effectively promised. We don't say not promised, but is promised. Trent says, it's funny you mentioned son because I think back to how he was with Vic and Matt and father-son thing figuratively. Oh, you're going back to the Matt Ryan thing. Okay, yeah, all right, so we're coming through here. I don't see him gushing over Penix that way. Could just be me. It's also because Michael Penix hasn't been here long enough. Mike Vick was his first quarterback. Mike Vick was the guy that he traded a ton of capital in the draft to go get in 2001, of course, and then you come back with Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan leads you through to the golden era of Falcons football. More like the bronze era when you compare it to most franchises, but it's still the golden era of this franchise. And Matt was somebody who dragged this franchise through the thick of just the dirt that Vic left it in and elevated it and brought it to some winning ways that it had never really experienced before. It led the Falcons to a Super Bowl. He won an MVP, was consistently a strong presence in the locker room and in the community and everything else. So, I think very highly of Matt, just in general. Penix, he's still 26 years old, and he just finished his second year. And really, he's only been the starting quarterback for half a season. So I don't think that you're going to talk about Penix being talked about that way for a couple of years. I don't think that Matt was talked about that way for many years until after they had worked together for a good period of time. So I don't want to put too much on that too soon. Trenton Full, he comes back and says, if we cut Kirk and get Stefanski, does the blank even allow a conversation? A conversation for what? For, I'm not sure what you're referring to. Sorry. Halsey says Carson Beck equals Matt Ryan 2.0. That's an interesting comparison. Carson Beck, I would say, actually has a better arm. Matt Ryan, I would say, has higher football IQ. But Matt had a similar profile coming out of college. Matt, when he was at Boston College, he threw a lot of interceptions. And he had to grow and develop as somebody who's not going to make a lot of kind of risky decisions. But I think that also had to do with the type of offense that he was running and the players that he was playing with. Boston College is not exactly Miami. And Carson Beck, I mean, I actually don't hate this comparison. This isn't, I know some people are going to loathe it. Personality-wise, I think they couldn't be further from each other. But as far as their play on the field, not the craziest comparison. And I tend to agree in some capacity. But interesting. Terry says, Falcons need to trade down general manager for a change. Maybe they need to stand pat. Maybe they need to trade up. I don't want a general manager who's afraid to do things. I want a general manager who, if he has a guy, I want him to go get it. Like, would we be a better franchise, Terry, if they didn't go and get James Pierce? Would we be a better franchise if we didn't trade up and go get Julio Jones? I mean, you can point to a lot of examples of it not working out, but there are also several examples of the Falcons trading up in the draft and going and getting their guy where it has worked out. You know, so I don't want a blanket thing. I want a guy who's able to trade back, who's willing to trade back, who's willing to trade up, or he's willing to stand pat and see what he can get. If that makes sense. The Great says, stay far away from the Panthers brass. Oh, yeah. And then he follows up, says, didn't know he was with the Chiefs for a long time. Yeah, no, look, this is why these processes are so interesting is because you look at where a guy is right now, right? You look at it where a guy, he could be with the Raiders, but he could have also spent 15 years before that with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a la the Vegas general manager right now, Spytek. He spent a long time with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You know, so you got to look in a little bit deeper just from where they are right now, because you look at Ian Cunningham, good example there. He's been with the Chicago Bears, a franchise that's been known to not really do so well, right? That's not a franchise that's been doing too well over the last 15 years, let's say. You would say, oh my God, why would you want to go get a guy from that organization? Well, because he actually has experience with the Eagles and the Ravens. And that's where he cut his teeth before eventually taking the big job, I guess you could call it, with the Bears. And then since then, they've done really well. You know, so you got to look in a little bit deeper. You got to dig just a little bit. August says, I think Mac Jones is the best available quarterback. He's a former first-round pick, can operate the West Coast system. Yeah, again, like if they go get Mac Jones for the right price, like a 7th-round pick, I think would be fine. He's not on the open market, though, so you can't just throw money at him. And you're not going to get him in here just to do nothing, right? So you're going to have to make a trade. You're going to have to make a trade, and it just depends on what they want. He's on an expiring deal. It's not a super expensive deal at that. So maybe a 6th-round pick would be enough to get it done. I don't think a 7th will get it done. But we'll see. I tend to agree. I love the idea of getting a Mac Jones in here. I think Mac Jones in a Falcons uniform would make a ton of sense. He's a high floor guy who would come in behind Michael Penix and give you something off the bench should the need arise. And then if he plays really well, he could be your starter. Like, he was drafted in the top 10? I think it was 8 or 9 or something like that a couple of years ago. So I think he could be an interesting option there. Rio says, trust me, Matt LaFleur is going to be gone if they don't reach the NFC Championship. And it probably won't be a firing. In other news, I wouldn't mind Saleh or Flores so long as we get an experienced offensive coordinator. Yeah, Rio, and that's the thing. I think Flores is a very compelling candidate. Ryan Fitzpatrick, who was his quarterback, I believe he was his quarterback down in Miami, or at least he's well connected with the Dolphins organization. A lot of people, I mean, look, the way that everything went down in Miami was very unfortunate. A lot of things happened. They were trying to tank. He didn't want to tank. They were trying to go get Tom Brady. They were trying to do all these other things, and ownership was getting in the way, and it was really messy. And then there was the lawsuit and everything else. And Fitzpatrick brought something up about how he's not exactly going to get a glowing endorsement from folks down there in Miami, and it's because he burned a lot of bridges, you know, and that matters to a lot of people. It does matter to a bunch of people, but at the same time, I do think that he's going to get another opportunity because he's a damn good coach. He's a really good coach. And I do tend to agree, if you can match him with a good offensive play caller, it will make for a compelling product. But again, I said this with Saleh. I said this with Flores. I'll say this with, what was it? Shula, Mike Shula. There are a lot of great defensive coaches. Vance Joseph is another one. There are a lot of really good defensive coaches out there that are going to get jobs. There are a lot of them. And if you're a Mike McDonald and you'll get a Clint Kubiak, then you're going to take off. My question is, what happens when Clint Kubiak's gone? What happens when you have Sam Darnold making a ton of money and you're then trying to figure out what you're going to do at offensive coordinator? You're right back at square one with a lot of that. And you need to go find somebody then who you need to figure out stuff in a hurry. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you get an offensive coordinator who just sticks around for a long time. Josh McDaniels did that in New England for a long time. He stuck around. And when it didn't work out, he would come back. But eventually those guys run out and those coaches get fired. And the coaches that generally have had staying power across the NFL in this day and age, most of them have been offensive coaches, at least the ones that are winning Super Bowls and competing and doing stuff at a high level, right? It's not an exact science. But there is a method to that kind of madness. You see Philip Crawford says G Money. G Money. Yeah, I'll roll with that. If you guys want to call me G Money, I'm happy to be G Money. We'll go roll with that. Berto says, would you put over on Twitter? First Twitter comment of the day. Would you put ATL in a category of teams that need a blockbuster trade this offseason? No, I don't think so. But again, I think that there aren't blockbuster trades that happen all the time. It's just not a very common thing. I just don't know what you're trading. Unless you are, I don't even know what we classify as a blockbuster. You're going to need potentially a cornerback. You need a wide receiver. You need, and look, the other side of this is, are you acquiring or are you selling? Because if the Falcons are going to sell and to qualify as a blockbuster, that means you're trading Bijan Robinson. You're trading a Drake London, maybe, or trading a Michael Penix. But I don't think you're trading Michael Penix because he doesn't have any value right now just because he's coming off of a knee injury. Or one of your edge rushers. The Falcons don't really have a ton of players who you would quantify as blockbuster, right? That's not where they stand right now across the NFL. But as far as acquiring somebody, I don't think they have assets to go do it. You have a lot of holes and you don't have a lot of picks and you don't have a lot of capital, right? The fact that you don't have a first-round pick this year means that you're a little hamstrung just in terms of being in that blockbuster type category. So no, I don't think so. But also blockbuster trades don't really happen in the NFL all that much. You'll see them occasionally, like what the Jets did. They had a pair of them. But again, you don't see it very often. It's just not the way the NFL really works. Halsey says having more picks is at least more interesting than having less picks. I don't give a damn about picks, truthfully, Halsey. I would rather have the right players. I want the right players. The idea is what makes picks so tantalizing. I think the chance at getting somebody else, it's like getting the mystery box versus the guaranteed item. I would rather have Julio Jones than any number one of those picks that you traded away to go get him. Right? I'd rather take Julio Jones, but it's not the only example. I mean, Desmond Trufant's another player they traded up for. Didn't exactly work out. I mean, you did it a handful of times and it didn't always work out. But the thing is, I'd rather have a general manager who's willing to do that or willing to trade back. It's not my whole thing with my response to you, Halsey, was not that I want or don't want something. I just need somebody who's willing to do or able to do a lot of different things. Flexibility is the thing that I really care about. Ray Finney says Falcons just blocked the Cowboys from interviewing Ulbrich. I think that was for the general manager position, or not general, for the defensive coordinator position. That would make sense. I didn't see that report. I'm actually opening my phone to see if I did miss that. Oh, there it is. 17 minutes ago, Cowboys were denied chance to talk with Jeff Ulbrich for their defensive coordinator job. Okay. A potential interview can be revisited later if they hire a head coach who had a different coordinator in mind. Interesting. So yeah, that tells me that they want him to stay as defensive coordinator. And that's the same thing as somebody just trying to come in and if he was going to go interview for a head coaching job, and Ray Fitty, thank you for the heads up there. Obviously, I'm in this. I'm not seeing updates and other things like that. If he was interviewing for a head coaching job, Falcons would allow him to go. Falcons would allow him to go because that's just what you do for your people. But in terms of coordinator to coordinator, defensive coordinator, screw him. Like there's no, sorry, you don't get to do that too. But once you bring in the new head coach and let him make the decision from there, because he's still under contract with the Falcons. So the Falcons would have to fire him and then he can go figure it out from there. But I want Ulbrich here in Atlanta. All right, guys, we got about 5-ish minutes or so, maybe 10 minutes, depending on how much more time I have, how much more strength my voice has. It's been a really long day. Best way to get it, I'm going to keep going through these comments, as many as I can get. I know we've got 250 people in the chat right now, so I want to get to as many of these as I can. Super chats over on YouTube are the best way to get to the front of the line. If you drop a super chat, I go to you straight away. So if you have something you really want to ask, then that's the best way to do it. Let's keep going here. Yeah, so I see a bunch of people are starting to jump in with the Jeff Ulbrich. Yeah, he said, that's for 1978. Appreciate that. Terry says, really appreciate Arthur Blank listening to his customer cries because ultimately fans were asking for a complete leadership change, including himself. Give him credit. He essentially did that with Rich. So Rich McKay is not going to be involved in football operations. I mean, Rich McKay, he even pushed back on a question that was asked earlier today. That his calendar did not really allow for a lot of involvement with football. At the end of the day, take it with a grain of salt. I've seen Rich McKay at Flowery Branch. I've seen Rich McKay at various Falcons events. I've seen him at places, but that doesn't mean that I know what's going on behind closed doors. I don't. And at the end of the day, we can only take them at their word that he says that Rich McKay was not involved in Falcons organization structures or anything like that. And now he's been completely and totally removed from Falcons structures. We'll go from there. But no, I did appreciate Arthur Blank. And it is league rule that he speaks to the media. So it's not necessarily out of the goodness of his heart that he went and did this press conference. He was mandated by league policy to do it because they have to have a press conference for us. But he did talk about that. But you listen to your customers. If they require a change, then at some point you got to listen to them. And he did that. And he did have the complete restructuring of the Falcons organization. And I think it's going to make for an interesting model. We'll see. You're adding another cook to the kitchen, and it's not always the best way to do stuff, but I know that the way that they had been doing things did not work. They've been outside of the playoffs for 8 consecutive seasons, and that's all I know for sure. You know, I mean, they've been close, but they haven't been able to get over the hump, and it was time for a trade or a change. I say trade because Ray Fitty says trade Bates to get more picks. I don't think they're going to trade Jesse Bates. Let's see. I'm going to look at his contract. And maybe that's something they could look into. I don't think that that's going to be a deal that they make. I would say if you're just tearing things down to the studs and you want to just completely hit the reset button, yeah, so he's going to be in the last year of his deal. Next year, 2026 is going to be the final year. His base salary also goes up all the way to $13 million. Actually, he has a void year. He does have a void year in 2027. So there is a chance that I think the Falcons are going to be able to potentially hold on to him. And the way that you trade a Jesse Bates is if you're completely ripping it down and starting from scratch. I don't think that the Falcons want to do that. I think Arthur Blank wants to compete. I think Arthur Blank wants to compete right away. And based off of the strength that the defense showed this year, the growth and development that they showed, if you retain Jeff Ulbrich and you continue to see some of the progress. And progress is not always linear, so we can't always say, oh, they're going to get better next year. It's not always the case. But assuming you do, Jesse Bates helps that. And if Jesse Bates is there, then all of a sudden your defense is in better shape to compete and be effective again in 2026. I think that I talked about this on one of the previous podcasts. Lean into this defensive identity. I think that makes a ton of sense for the Falcons moving forward. Trading Jesse Bates, I think, only moves you backwards. And I don't think you're going to get a ton of value for him either. You might get a day 2 pick or something for him. And if you think that that's worth trading Jesse Bates, fine. I disagree. B Lane says trade Pitts. You can't trade Pitts anymore. He's not going to be on your roster. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent come March. So you can't trade him. Keith says, would you say we are in a complete rebuild again? Well, we were never in a complete rebuild. That was one of the biggest points of contention, I'd say, for a lot of people, just in terms of where the Falcons were, because they were not ready to compete. First year of Arthur Smith, they came in here 2021. They overachieved. They win 7 games. Year 2, they overachieved again, won 7 games. And then they're like, well, we're here now that we have our team. And then they got out of cap hell and they were able to actually go and compete. 7-10 in 2023. So that's just where they went. They avoided the term rebuild like the plague, man. They hated that term. They kept using the phrase retool, not rebuild, retool. And we all knew that they needed to tear it down to the studs. It was the island of misfit toys on defense when Dean Pease was coaching. And from there, it was just not great. And they never actually tore it all down. But no, I don't think that the Falcons are in a rebuild at all. You have pieces that can contend right now. You have pieces that can be solid. It's just the damn quarterback position. I think that's what you keep coming back to. What can you do at quarterback to get you to compete next season? And one of the commenters, several commenters have now said it. Mac Jones, if that's the guy who you feel can get you to the next level and competing to win games in 2026, great. Go make a deal. If it's Michael Penix and him coming back healthy, you're gambling that he's going to be completely healthy and play a full season. That's a gamble. But if you're the guy who can potentially, this Clint Kubiak or Stefanski or whomever it ends up being, if you're the guy to take Penix and unlock his potential and get him another weapon with opposite of Drake London, with Darnell Mooney and these guys, that wide receiver core might be pretty good with Darnell Mooney as a wide receiver 3. I think that makes a ton of sense. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But you've got Bijan Robinson. You've got these other tools and pieces that could be this a pretty good offense, and some pieces on defense that could be pretty good. So no, we're not in a rebuild right now, but it's going to be a first-year head coach. And I think it all starts with what the new head coach wants and what the new regime wants at general manager. Keith says, trade all the picks for a superstar. No, you're not doing that. This isn't the NBA, my man. But I appreciate it. But yeah. So B Lane says Pitts plus Algier. Again, Tyler Algier is a free agent. So there's a very good chance that we've seen the very last of him. It's a good chance that we've seen the last of Kyle Pitts as well. But no, I mean, they're not your players anymore. If you re-sign them, then you can go do that, but they're not your players. So they're free agents. Last question I'm going to take here, barring a super chat or something like that. But Berto 95 North says, do you see Arthur Blank's son making more football decisions in the coming years? This was actually a question that I really wanted to ask Arthur. And if we get an opportunity to do that, if we talk to Arthur Blank again, this is a question that I want to ask. Josh Blank is my age. He was at the press conference. Excuse me. He was at the press conference. He was sitting catty corner to me. He was up to my left. I heard rumors that he had something to do with this decision. I don't know if I buy into those rumors, because at this point they're just rumors. They're not. It didn't come from a credible source, but I heard it. And I wanted to ask about it, because he is being groomed and trained in how to be the owner of this team. And I wonder at what point, when you have an owner who's in his 80s, at what point do you start thinking about handing over the reins to your son, to the next generation? Because Josh was there. Josh has been present at every press conference that I can remember after games. And he listens to everything, and he's around. I've seen him at Flowery Branch on several different occasions. And I do think that ultimately he will start coming in and making some of these decisions. I think that the decision-making power still resides with his dad. Arthur still is going to make all the decisions, but I think Josh has been in the room. I think Josh will be a part of these coaching and general manager and president of football discussions. I think he's going to be in the room for the hire. I think he's going to be in the room and in the decision-making process. He's not going to make the decision, if that makes sense, Berto. Arthur's still going to make the final decision, but I think that Josh more and more is going to be involved in that process. All right. Big thank you to everybody. We did a full hour. Man, you guys had such great questions, and I really appreciate all the comments. Everybody who jumped in and listened, we hit, I think we peaked at about 250 people in this podcast, man. And it's growing, and we're getting more and more of you guys getting in here and following along. Reminder that we do this every single Tuesday and every single Thursday. So if it's your first time in here, welcome. I hope to see you again very soon. I hope to get you in on this podcast more frequently. So set that reminder on your phone. Make sure to jump into this podcast because I like to make it as user-friendly as possible. I love to answer as many questions as I can. And I really appreciate all of you guys who are getting in here and asking such good quality questions. Scott's going to be back with you again next week, so make sure to tune in for that one as well. Give me a follow if you're over there on Twitter, at GChapATL. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Make sure to follow in there. It doesn't cost you a thing. Just takes a second, and then you can get all the notifications and jump in with us more frequently, and you can get all the fun content that we have coming out for you as well. But really do appreciate you guys. This podcast is continuing to grow, and it's because of you guys. It's because of you guys, and I really, really appreciate you guys. But my name is Garrett Chapman for Falcons on SI. This has been the Falcons Podcast. Until next time, go Falcons.